All
That's what
right,
happens when you're busy.
welcome, Gugu, and thank you so much for agreeing to have this conversation with me. And I'm really excited and looking forward to just having a conversation around how the financial system, conditions women's money mindsets or shapes women's money mindsets. Gugu, it will be good for our viewers for them to hear who you are. So if you can just please just briefly introduce yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mavis. Thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Gugu Stagi. I am a certified financial planner. I am self-employed. I run a practice called Wealth Creed, and the main focus of our business is to help people achieve financial success. And it was initially founded actually to help Black women in particular. But over the years, we've found that we are assisting people from all walks of life who are finding value in our business. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I'm excited to have this conversation. You and I have engaged, I think, at different platforms at Wendy's seminar, and we also had a webinar for women where we talked about money. And this is our third engagement. So thank you for agreeing to have the conversation. So my upcoming book, the financial freedom for her well-being, is a book that has been inspired also by journeying with a lot of professional women, executive women. And when we do the wheel of life or the assessment of the total person, one of the things that kind of intrigued me the most was finding that the majority of women had their money aspect or money aspect of life not really taken care of how would I have probably assumed they're taken care of. So from the outside you would see success, but when you started to do the numbers or when they started to review their own sort of financial lives, you often found kind of a disconnect between what was, what we probably assumptions that had been made regarding you are an executive, you are in this role. The assumption is that you're also financially, successful. And that, as a result, inspired me to continue to just kind of listen, but also explore why is it that many professional women who look successful are not as successful financially. What is that disconnect? What's going on? And I think that is what led to my writing of the book, where I noticed that, the conditioning that we receive early on shapes how we deal with money, but also the work-life integration. It was very interesting to notice that the work-life integration also affects how people engage with money. If you're constantly overwhelmed, constantly busy, you don't have the actual psychological capacity to engage with your money and the way you need to engage with it. So it's always making decisions in a reactive way. But today, we just want to talk about how the financial system shapes the money mindsets of women. And my first question for you, Gugu, is do you think access to money automatically creates financial empowerment?
No, definitely not. And the evidence is out there. I mean, there's a very popular TV show. I won't mention it, but where people come into money, like large sums of money, and these are people who are typically from I don't want to say impoverished backgrounds, but disadvantaged backgrounds, so people who would not have had maybe a well-paying job or would have never experienced that kind of money or affluence, and then they all of a sudden come into large sums of money, and we see how destructive it is for those kind of people, men and women, right? And so just by simply having access to money doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing for you if the right kind of knowledge, skill, training, and I think viewpoint on money is not fixed.
Okay. Okay. One, would you assume that, by the age you get money, your viewpoint on money is kind of correct? You're talking about we need to fix it. What are we fixing?
We were all of us are raised differently when it comes to money. We're raised in a specific way when it comes to money, right? So depending on who the dominant adult was in your life, that's the messaging that you get and that's the training that you get, right? So if the dominant adult in your life was, for example, stringent, secretive, and not open about money,
Right.
the research suggests that you're likely to behave in that way. And if you don't, you're likely to do the extreme opposite of that, so to rebel,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that either is good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what all of us, and I think that's the awareness that all of us need to have, is that once you come into money, once you start interacting with money,
Mm-hmm.
there's a very high probability that you are behaving in the way that you were taught subconsciously by the people that raised you.
So the conditioning, so the social family
Absolutely.
conditioning
Yeah.
that is, shaped your mindset. So do you think the financial system rewards literacy or compliance?
No, there's definitely no rewarding for literacy. I mean, even how it's positioned, the language around it isn't sufficient. So people don't know.
Mhm.
I mean, even the term itself, financial literacy, most people can't even explain what that means,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I help a lot of late, I'm helping a lot of people with like basic financial coaching
Mm-hmm.
needs.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing there, and this is a large number of people,
Mm-hmm.
people are getting into debt because they're told that that'll enable them to get access to more debt, right? When they need it.
Yeah, yeah.
So people who don't need to get into debt,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's what we're seeing here. People who have no reason to get a personal loan,
Mm-hmm.
no reason to have a credit card that they're actively using. People are
Right.
doing all of those things,
Mm-hmm.
and in the hopes that when they are ready to buy bigger assets, for example, like a house or a car, that they'll be enabled by the system to do so. And there's a huge gap between what they're doing and what they're trying to achieve, because a lot of them aren't even aware that they need to service these loans, right?
Right.
So people
Yeah,
access the credit
yeah.
and then they forget about it. So they use it and then they think, okay, now I'm fine. I should be able to get a house later on. And
Yeah.
then things obviously fall by the wayside. So the system definitely, and it's all because people are told that they need to have a certain level of a credit score, but they don't
Credit
really
score.
understand what that means and what your responsibility as a consumer to keep that thing maintained, to keep your credit card at a certain level, to pay it off on a frequent basis and things like that. So people are not connecting all of the dots. They just hear certain things. This is what I need. That's what I have to do. And then they're doing it.
Yeah, so you actually get into debt to build a credit score, and you actually can even end up ruining it. So
That's
you end
it.
up
And
not
that's what
having the
happens.
very thing that you are
That's
looking
exactly
for,
what
because,
that's exactly what we're seeing. Yeah.
and that's the financial literacy gap. They give you
Yeah.
access, but the literacy is missing. You don't understand the interest rates. You don't understand how you need to be repaying the debt to maintain the credit score. So that is very interesting. So what financial decisions do you think women are conditioned to accept rather than question?
I find that women tend to take care of like daily expenses. Do you know what I mean? Like the day-to-day stuff. So managing the budget at home, managing the groceries, what are children taking to school, what clothes are we buying for the season?
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of things women are relegated to making those kind of decisions.
Right.
And and it's also again in the research that for the investment type of decisions and for things like what property are we buying and those kind of things,
Mm.
those tend to be deferred to men
Right.
because the assumption is that firstly, he's the provider,
Mm-hmm.
right? And secondly, he knows what he's doing when it comes to the investments for the household.
Right.
And so those are the sort of big differences that we're seeing. That's for people in relationships. But for
Uh-huh.
single women,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I work with a lot of women. And it's encouraging to see that women are starting to realize that they cannot defer those kind of decisions to their male counterparts, right?
Right.
For the most part, and because simply, and a lot of the time, it's because women are forced into that position. There's
Yeah.
nobody else to
You're on
defer
your
to.
own. There's no one to
Absolutely,
delegate or
but
relegate to. Yeah.
yeah, but in instances where women are in relationships, that's the difference that you see.
Thank you for sharing that. And because you say that women then defer to men, I was speaking to Dr. Swangile yesterday, and we're talking about conditioning in the education system, and I said to her, despite the kind of in quotes success I have achieved educationally and maybe financially, and that is in quotes, I still would feel excited to be looked after by a man. Is that conditioning? Is that
It is.
is that
It is.
conditioning? what
Yeah.
part of us women is needs to get fixed?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's because we're all raised by a specific generation that was taught. And also largely because they didn't have a choice, right?
Okay.
Back in the day, you wouldn't be able to buy a house, you wouldn't be able to access credit if you were not married or if there was no significant male other in your life.
Right.
And so it makes sense why women then encouraged, it became a default system where women are now told, oh, of course you have to get married, because they understood that they were only people
Yeah.
if they were attached to a man, and therefore were able to access all these other financial resources. So I think what we now need to, I mean, we're now seeing more women are educated more than ever before.
Yep.
We know that system no longer applies, right? We're no longer discriminated in that way. So
Right.
we are able to self-actualize when it comes to personal finances.
Right.
And now we need to strip that from the provision aspect to say that you don't necessarily need a spouse to be able to manage your finances in a specific way. We're not discouraging you to get a spouse, but the two aren't necessarily linked.
Yeah.
And I think we all need to get on that page to say women can actually manage their finances and actually excel really, really well, even within relationships, and it needs to be enabled.
Wow, thank you for that. I could listen to you the whole day and I could have this conversation for the whole day. But one last question. What financial conditioning do you hope the next generation of women no longer inherit? Maybe this speaks to your last kind of point as well. What is the conditioning that you think women, we no longer need to inherit this?
Yeah. I've just found that the one big unlock that really helps people move from one phase in their finances to the next is a meaningful way to track their money, right? We call it a budget, but I think that word has lost its meaning because we use it interchangeably for many other things as well.
Right.
Right? Tracking your money, what comes in, what goes out in a meaningful way, and then building sort of data from that, and you only get data once you've tracked something over time.
Yeah.
It's such a valuable thing that I've found, and that's what we help clients with, right? We're able to give them statistics just by going back on how you spent your money for the last couple of months. It's so insightful. People will. The first question, I don't see people until they've shown me their budget. So I always say to them, how do you spend your money? What do you spend on this thing? And people will always mouth a figure, right?
Yeah.
And I know through practice that those figures are almost correct, but they're not necessarily, right? And so once we start going through the numbers, it's a tedious process, but so valuable. Once we start going through the numbers and unpacking them properly, the eyes are always wide open like this, because people go, I had no idea that that's what I was doing. Right. And with that kind of information, you're then able to pivot. You're then able to move from one phase to another, because now you're aware, there's an awareness. Right. And for a lot of people, and I'm not saying you can't budget your way out of poverty like that. That's a starting point. Right. But for a lot of people, the change comes from that awareness. Once they're aware that this is what they're doing with their money, they're able to redirect their money. And that's usually more than additional money into their salary every month. That actually changes the reality a lot sooner, while they're waiting for the salary to adjust, while they're waiting for that bonus. And people don't realize just how powerful that is. So I think people need to stop shying away from this thing of tracking your money on a regular basis. It is so incredibly powerful, and it's probably one of the biggest changes that you can make in your finances to really shift your financial reality.
Wow, thank you so much, Gugu. We need to stop the mental math, right? So you'll be thinking, oh, I think I spent it on that, I spend it on that. But when you really look at it, and I like the idea of data. We talk about data in other areas, but we don't use our own data to actually make, financial decisions that do make a difference. So thank you so much for this conversation. And I look forward to ongoing conversations around, money, women, and how we can better our lives, our financial lives as women. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mavis.